Good evening, and welcome to all you lovers of poetry. My name is Ashabi Rich, and I want to thank you for joining us. We are here to pay tribute to the poetry of Laureate Paul Laurence Dunbar in support of the national commemoration of Juneteenth. This group, called Love of Dunbar, is an international collective of storytellers, poets, writers, and producers. Its members gather weekly to research Dunbar's life, discuss his works, and recite his poetry. Celebrated internationally during his lifetime and forward to today, Paul Laurence Dunbar was a gifted American author who wrote poetry, novels, librettos, speeches, and short stories. Today, our program theme is Dunbar, City to Country, as we focus on a few of his timeless Southern and Northern dialect poems. A gifted writer, Dunbar's poetry reveals him to have been an astute perceiver of life. His work reflects keen observations of family, friends, acquaintances, sundry communities, and myriad situations. He analyzed the present and the past, whether mundane or exceptional, and translated this information into writings that demonstrated his gift to perceive and understand human nature, the temperature of social and political situations, and the context of historical events and environments. Dunbar explored actions and reactions, probabilities and conclusions, truths and lies by staging his characters under various conditions and moods. His writing illustrates valor, friendship, social events, melancholy, romantic fancies, angst, spirituality, and anger. His imagination giving voice to thoughts and dialogues between people, inanimate things, and the lives of plants and animals. Bountifully gifted, Dunbar painted mental pictures with the compositions he wrote using his pen as brush. The talent he possessed, illuminated through his discerning ear and analytical mind, still results in joy for generations of readers and rapt audiences. Additionally, his writing is skillfully layered, such that meaning can be derived in the immediate or consumed more thoroughly after revelatory reflection. Dunbar effectively used North American vernaculars and dialects to display a cross-section of the US, a skill he naturally honed as a child of family from the Southern cultures and furthered as a student growing up in the Northern US. In this program, his Southern dialect works are referred to as country, and his Northern dialect works as city. Dunbar is well composed in an Irish English dialect. We encourage you to further explore his extensive repertoire with the links found at our website, www.loveofdunbar.com. Before we begin, I'd like to share with you a few housekeeping protocols for our presentation here on Zoom. Our program will be recorded. Those who do not wish to be visually recorded should leave their video camera off. Please note that the chat feature is disabled during the presentation, and our audience will be muted until the end. You can refer to and save the chat for information on our presenters, and also to follow the program outline of the featured poetry. At the conclusion of the program, the Zoom room will be open for everyone to offer feedback and share. Please raise your virtual hand to be unmuted if you wish to speak or recite your own favorite Dunbar poem. We welcome you to join us in our weekly Zoom meetings by registering with your interest at our email address, loveofdunbar@gmail.com. And now we will share a brief video on Dunbar's life produced by Bettye Haskins.
The 1870s, a momentous decade. Congress creates the United States Department of Justice, ratifies the 15th Amendment, guaranteeing voting power for African American men, passes the Ku Klux Klan Act, authorizing the president to declare martial law to suppress the horrific organization. Montgomery Ward issues its first mail order catalog. and Levi Strauss patents the blue jeans. The first Kentucky Derby is run, and the winner, a black man, Oliver Lewis. June 27th, 1872. Paul Laurence Dunbar, a prolific writer of poetry, novels, and plays, is born in Dayton, Ohio. To Joshua and Matilda Dunbar. Although the marital discord between Joshua and Matilda caused Paul to live a transient life, moving from neighborhood to neighborhood and attending many different schools, it did not stop the child prodigy who wrote his first poem at the age of 6 and performed his first recital at the age of 8. Matilda and Joshua were born into slavery, and in their support of their son's love of words, they often told him tales of the plantation life they had endured. These stories found their way into many of Dunbar's poetry and prose. In a 1902 newspaper article, Dunbar wrote, "My mother, who had no education except what she picked up herself, and who is generally conceded to be a very unusual woman, taught me to read when I was 4 years old. Both my father and mother were fond of books and used to read to us as we sat around the fire at night." Paul and Matilda's relationship was a strong one. His mother ensured that he received a stellar education by attending night school herself to improve her own literacy skills so that she could help her son. And Paul rewarded her efforts by receiving a high school diploma, a feat only accomplished by less than 3% of Americans in 1891. At his graduation ceremony from Central High School in Dayton, the entire graduating class performed Farewell Song, written by Paul, with music by F.C. Mayer. Although Matilda wanted her son to be a minister, and he himself aspired to be an attorney, fate had a different path for him, though it was not an auspicious beginning. After graduation, Paul secured a position as an elevator operator. He was often seen perched on his stool in the elevator, surrounded by books and papers. Throughout his tenure in this job, Dunbar gave several free recitals in and around Dayton. While Paul struggled to succeed in Dayton, often receiving negative reactions to his poems, a number of local citizens recognized his genius and offered him assistance and support. He was hired as a page in the Dayton Common Pleas Court, the first time a colored man had ever been appointed to a position in the courthouse other than as a janitor. It was in this position that Paul decided that instead of pursuing law, he would dedicate his life to writing in order to interpret my own people through song and story, and to prove to the many that after all, we are more human than African. And so he continued to search for other employment representative of his education and literary accomplishments. He accepted a temporary position as editor of the Indianapolis World, and while there, happened upon a poem in the Boston Monthly Review, written by a poet, New Orleans native Alice Ruth Moore. He wrote Miss Moore to comment on her poem and the ideas she conveyed in it. Now, Dunbar was no stranger to romance and love, as demonstrated by the swooning ladies at his performances. However, his love for Alice, who became his wife, is legendary. Dunbar returned to Dayton and began to write tirelessly. His works appeared in the leading journals and magazines of the day, including Harper's Weekly, the Saturday Evening Post, and Current Literature. Commentators, including William Dean Howells, often noted that Dunbar appeared to be of pure African descent, at a time when many leading members of the African American community were obviously of mixed race, often with considerable European ancestry. This distinction, along with the admiration of his poetry and short stories, led to an invitation to do a literary tour in Europe. Prior to leaving, Paul asked Alice Moore to marry him. She accepted. In February 1897, Dunbar set sail upon the Umbria for Liverpool, England. He received a hearty welcome, as evidenced by one of his letters to Alice Moore, now his fiancée. The people are very nice to me. It appears that I am the most interviewed man in London, the best papers having sent reporters to me. Later that year, the Library of Congress received a letter from lawyer, orator, and library patron Robert G. Ingersoll, asking if the library had a position for Dunbar. An excerpt of the letter reads, "Dunbar is now in England. He is coming home. He, of course, is poor, but he is crazy to read, to be in the company of books. Could you give this young fellow a place in the library?" Dunbar secured a position as an attendant in the Library of Congress. He worked in the library's closed stacks, dealing with the dust and the must of books in a hot, closed space was unpleasant work for the young man and strained his health. Oh, but sometimes adversity inspires great art, and Dunbar's experiences working in a difficult library environment in which he felt like he was trapped in a cage are the basis for one of his best-known poems, Sympathy. Dunbar's most notable accomplishment during his time working in the library stacks had nothing to do with his actual job duties. He was the first poet to give a poetry reading at the Library of Congress. The reading took place in 1897 in the library's reading room. His other accomplishment while working at the library? His marriage to Alice Moore. She urged him to leave the job at the Library of Congress in order to focus on more important things. She encouraged him to pursue his writing. In addition, she encouraged him to promote his poetry through public readings. While in Washington, D.C., Dunbar also attended Howard University. 2 short years after leaving the Library of Congress, Dunbar contracted a fatal disease, tuberculosis. Upon the advice of his doctors, the Dunbars, Paul, Alice, and his mother Matilda left Washington, D.C. They moved to Colorado, where Paul continued to write. Just as with his parents, Dunbar's marriage was rocky, and in 1902, he and Alice separated, but never divorced. They had no children. Despite suffering with a failed marriage and a fatal disease, Dunbar would continue to create prolifically. He wrote his final novel, The Sport of the Gods, a 300-page novel in 30 days. The film version, with its integrated cast, would later be released and marked a breakthrough in desegregation in the entertainment industry. Billboard advertised the opening on its primary page, making it the first time this level of recognition had ever been paid to a race film. The Sport of the Gods commemorative stamp was released in 2008. Paul Laurence Dunbar was very active in the area of civil rights and the upliftment of African Americans. The great abolitionist Frederick Douglass called him the most promising young colored man in America. Dunbar wrote widely published essays critical of Jim Crow laws, lynching, and what was commonly called the Negro problem. He worked with other leading civil rights notables, including W.E.B. Du Bois, to create the American Negro Academy, the first organization in the United States to support African American academic scholarship in the liberal arts. On February 9th, 1906, Paul Laurence Dunbar passed away in Dayton, at the home he had purchased for his mother. The home has now been designated as a national treasure and museum. The newspapers of the time reported that the sweetest singer of his race is dead, having succumbed to consumption. It is said that he died in Matilda's arms while reciting the 23rd Psalm. He was only 33 years old. During his short 13-year career, Dunbar created more than 400 poems, a dozen books of poetry, 4 books of short stories, 4 novels, a play, and lyrics for a musical. His illustrious legacy leaves a national monument, university buildings, streets, parks, hospitals, libraries, and over 140 schools named in his honor. The Dunbar Apartments, as well as the Dunbar National Bank, were built by John D. Rockefeller Jr. to provide housing and banking for African Americans. Although the bank closed in 2008, the apartments have been converted to upscale condominiums currently in use. Many greats, including composer William Grant Still, poet and author Maya Angelou, author Toni Morrison, poet and activist Nikki Giovanni, poet and writer Langston Hughes, and author Zora Neale Hurston have been immensely inspired by his works. Despite overt discrimination, despite financial instability, despite health issues, Paul Laurence Dunbar kept plugging away. Dunbar was truly a brilliant black man who excelled in his brief life, leaving a wealth of literature that continues to be relevant to this day. In a 1905 essay, Dunbar wrote, "People are taking it for granted that the Negro ought not work with his head, and it is so easy for these people among whom we are living to believe this. It flatters and satisfies their self-complacency." Paul Laurence Dunbar was born in Dayton, Ohio on June 27, 1872, and transitioned 33 years later on February 9, 1906. Paul Laurence Dunbar, truly a man of distinction, a literary trailblazer.
Well, Betty, we thank you for that very moving and well done video. Thank you very much. Dunbar was highly praised for his Southern dialect works, but his poems in standard American English were met with stingy praise and unfounded criticism, including charges of plagiarism, simply because the works were originated by an African-American writer. Through his composition, The Poet, Judy Bateman addresses the societal bias that Dunbar endured.
The poet, he sang of life, serenely sweet, with, now and then, a deeper note, from some high peak, now yet remote. He voiced the world's absorbing beat. He sang of love when earth was young, and love itself was in his lays. But the world, it turned to praise, a jingle in a broken tongue. Dunbar referred to his Southern dialect poems as a jingle in a broken tongue, and he was not happy they were gaining so much attention. However, it was in these poems the voices of his people came to life. We will now use our imagination to visit his mother's kitchen as her country friends from Kentucky are chatting about the issues of the day. So let us listen in on Dunbar's Trouble in the Kitchen, philosophy, the real question, and keep a plugging away.
Honey child, let me tell you about that trouble that was in the kitchen. Now, I'm not going to use no names, but y'all will know who I'm talking about. There was once an awful quarrel twixt the skillet and the pot. The pot was just a boiling, and the skillet sure was hot. They slurred each other's color, and they called each other names, while the coal oil can just a gurgle, pouring all upon the flames. Well, the pot, he called the skillet just a flat disfigured thing, and the skillet plied that all the pot could do was sit and sing. And he allowed that there was illusions that he wouldn't stop to make cause he recognized to do that. They had too much at stake. Well, at this, the pot boiled over cause his temper getting high. And the skillet got to sputtering, then the fat was sure enough in the fire. Mr. Fire, now, he just lay there smoking and thinking to himself, while the pepper pot, just a nudging old Ginger up on the shelf. Well, then they all just left it up to him, Mr. Fire, you know, about the trouble and the talk, and however he decided why they both walked the chalk. But the Fire so disgusted how they quarrel and how they shout that he cooled them off, I reckon, when he puffed and just went out.
I've been thinking about the preacher. What he said the other night about it being people's duty for to keep their faces bright. How one ought to live so pleasant that our temper never riles, meeting everybody round us with our very nicest smiles.
That's all right. I ain't disputing another thing. That sounds like fact. But you don't catch folks a grinning with a misery in the back. And you don't find them a smiling when they's hungry as can be. Leastways, that's how human nature always seems to appear to me.
We is most all pretty likely for to have our little cares. And I think we's doing first rate when we just go along in bears. without breaking up our faces in a sickly sort of grin when we knows that in our innards we is tightly mad as sin.
The old days time for being pleasant and for going smiling round. Cause I don't believe in people always toting round a frown. But it's easy enough to titter when the stew is smoking hot. But it's mighty hard to giggle when there's nothing in the pot.
Folks talking about the money, about the silver and the gold. All the time the season's changing and the days is getting cold. And they's wondering about the metals, whether we'll have one or two. Well, the price of coal is rising and rent is 2 months due. Some folks say that gold's the only money that's worth the name. Then the others rise and tell us that they ought to be ashamed. And that silver is the only thing to save us from the power of the gold bug raging and seeking who he can devour. Well, you folks can keep on shouting with your gold and your silver cry. But I tell you people, hams are scarce and fowls is roosting high. And it ain't the so to money that's festering my mind. But the question I want answered is how to get any kind.
I know that's right, my sister. I don't know how to get any kind of money. But you know what we got to do, sisters? We got to just keep on plugging away. You know what? I've a humble little motto that is homely, though it's true. Keep a plugging away. It's a thing when I've an object that I always try to do, and that's to keep plugging away. When you rise in storms to quell, when opposing waters swell, it never fails to tell to keep plugging away. If them hills is high before you and that path seems hard to climb, you just keep on plugging away. And remember that success comes to him who bides his time, and you keep on plugging away. From the greatest to the least, none are from the rule released. Be thou toiler, poet, or priest, you just keep on plugging away. Dwell away beneath the surface. There's treasure further down if you keep plugging away. Let the rain come down in torrents. Let the threatening heavens frown. You just keep on plugging away. When the clouds have rolled away, there will come a brighter day. All your labor to repay if you keep plugging away. Oh, my sisters, there'll be lots of sneers to swallow, and there'll be lots of pain to bear, but you keep plugging away. And if you got your eye on heaven, one bright day you'll wake up there if you keep plugging away. Perseverance still is king. Time your true reward will bring. You just work and wait, unwearying, and keep a plugging away. Oh, ladies, I'm telling you, we got some country kinfolks way over in Ireland, you know. Yes, right. Brother Peadar, he looking out the window in his little village, and he notices that a young man who has come a-courting his neighbor's daughter. But you know, circumstances can alter cases. Peadar, tell us what's going on.
That's surely the case. Circumstances alter cases. And just, I'd like to let you know first, for people that are not aware, I say ochrone, and ochrone means goodness gracious, oh dear. It's an ejaculation, and it can be enjoy, or it can be an enjoyment, or it can be in frustration or annoyance. So here you are, circumstances alter cases. Tim Murphy's gone walking with Maggie O'Neill, ochrone. If I was her feather, I'd frown on such fooling, ochrone. I'm sure it's unfeather like daring and wrong to let a girl hear tell as sassing the song of every young fella that happens along, ochrone. And Murphy, the things that's been said of his doing, ochrone. 'Tis a cud no decent folks wants to be chewing. If he came to my door with his skin a twirl for to try to make love to you, Bettye, me girl, I wouldn't have sent him away in a whirl. They say the gossoon is indecent and dirty, in spite of his dressing so mighty. Let him dress up as fancy as a king or a queen. Let him put on more wrinkles than ever was seen. You be sure he's no match for my little Colleen or Hrone. Ah, faith, the two's coming back, and their walk is all over, or Hrone. 'Twas a pretty short walk for to take with a lover, or Hrone. Why, I believe that the Murphys are coming this way. Ah, Bettye, just look at him stepping so gay. Sure, I'd never believe what the gossipers say, or Hrone. He's turned in the gate and he's coming a capering, or Hrone. Go, Bettye, go quick and put on a clean apron, or Hrone. Be quick as you can, for he's right at the door. Come in, Master Tim, for you're welcome, I'm sure. We were talking to you just a minute before, or Hrone.
We are now in the city of Dayton, Ohio, where Dunbar grew up, and he listened to the folks, where we'll hear, after the QUARREL presented by Donna Marie, Unsung Heroes, We Wear the Mask, The Lesson, Spring Song, and Spring Song.
After the quarrel, so we who've supped the soft same cup tonight must lay our friendship by. Your wrath has burned your judgment up. Hot breath has blown your ashes high. You say that you are wronged. Ah, well, I count that friendship poor at best. You say that you are wronged. That cannot stand our friends so slight a test. I fain would still have been your friend, and talked and laughed and loved with you. But since it must, why, let it end. The false but dies. 'Tis not that true? So we are favored, you and I, who only want the living truth. It was not good to nurse the lie. 'Tis well it died a harmless youth. I go from you tonight to sleep. Why, what's the odds? Why should I grieve? I have no fund of tears to weep. Happenings that undeceive, the days shall come, the days shall go, just as they came and went before. The sun shall shine, the stream shall flow, though you and I are friends no more. And in the volume of my years, when all my thoughts and acts shall be, the page whereon your name appears shall be forever lost to me. And that I hate you overmuch? No, 'tis less of hate than love divine. Howe'er our hands no more shall touch, we'll go our ways, the world is wide.
Someone who does great deeds but gets little recognition is an unsung hero. The American African soldiers who fought in the Civil War are certainly of these. In the next composition, I'll be reciting, Paul pays honor to his father, Joshua Dunbar, a brave Union soldier and representative here of the many, the unsung heroes. A song for the unsung heroes who rose in the country's need when the life of the land was threatened by the slavers' cruel greed. For the men who came from the cornfield, who came from the plow and the flail, who rallied round when they heard the sound of the mighty man of the rail. They laid themselves down in the valleys, they laid themselves down in the wood, and the world looked on at the work they did and whispered, "It is good." They fought their way on the hillside, they fought their way in the glen, and God looked down on their sinews brown, proud of his first human men. They went to the blue lines gladly, and the blue lines took them in. And the men who saw their muskets fire thought not of their dusky skin. The gray lines rose and melted beneath their scathing showers, and they said, "'Tis true, they have forced to do, these old slave boys of ours." Ah, Wagner saw their glory, and Pillow knew their blood that poured on the nation's altar, a sacrificial flood. Port Hudson heard their war cry that smote its smoke-filled air, and the old free fires of their primordial sires again were kindled there. They laid them down where the rivers, the greening valleys gem, and the song of the thunderous cannon was their sole requiem. And the great smoke wreath that mingled its hue with the dusky cloud was the flag that furled over a saddened world, and a sheet that made their shroud. Almighty God of the battles, who held them in thy hand, who gave them strength through the whole day's length to fight for their native land. They are lying dead on the hillsides, they are lying dead on the plain, and we have not fire to smite the lyre and sing them one brief strain. Give thou, some seer, the power to sing them in their might, the men who feared the master's whip, but did not fear the fight, that he may tell of their virtues as minstrels did of old, till the pride of face and the hate of race grow obsolete and cold. A song for the unsung heroes who stood the awful test, when the humblest host that the land could boast went forth to meet the best. A song for the unsung heroes who fell on the bloody side, who fought their way from night to day and struggled up to God. Paul Laurence Dunbar, who worked as an elevator operator, wore a mask of being happy, while actually being angry about the injustices and human rights violations prevalent in the United States of America due to racism, classism, and the generational trauma inflicted upon the African people who endured 339 years of chattel slavery. Undeniably, predominantly on the Africans' bitter labor, America was built to be a country of great financial wealth and prominence, while it proffered lucrative opportunity to any foreign-born who would come and work hard. Yet the American African received no recompense for the use of their hard labor and suffered unbridled theft of their intellectual property. They slaved first in the American colonies from 1526 to 1776, and then continued to slave after from 1776, when the USA officially came into existence, to 1865 with the Emancipation Proclamation. But in reality, they met with wretched treatment many years beyond that date. Thus, we wear the mask.
We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes, this debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties.
Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask.
We smile, but oh great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise, we wear the mask.
Oh, Laurence Dunbar often wrote about human conditions. This poem, The Lesson, is such a condition. My cot was down by a cypress grove, and I sat by my window the whole night long and heard well up from the deep dark wood a mockingbird's passionate song. Sometimes in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow. And I thought of myself so sad and lone, and my heart's life's cold winter that knew no spring, of my mind so weary and sick and wild, of my heart too sad to sing. But even as I listened to the mockingbird's song, a thought stole into my saddened heart, and I said, I can cheer some other soul by a carol's simple art. But if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. For oft from the darkness of hearts and lives come songs that brim with joy and light, as out of the gloom of the cypress grove, the mockingbird sings at night. So I sang a lay for my brother's ear in a strain to soothe his bleeding heart. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. And he smiled at the sound of my voice and lyre, though mine was a feeble art. But at his smile, I smiled in turn, and into my soul there came a ray. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on. In trying to soothe another's woes, mine own had passed away. You just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'll understand. We all need somebody to lean on me, lean on me, lean on me. The lesson.
And then in the words of Paul Laurence Dunbar, he speaks of the poet and his song. A song is but a little thing, and yet what joy it is to sing. In hours of toil, it gives me zest, and when at eve I long for rest. When cows come home along the bars, and in the fold I hear the bell, as night the shepherd herds his stars, I sing my song, and all is well. There are no ears to hear my lays, no lips to lift a word of praise, but still, with faith unfaltering, I live and laugh and love and sing. What matters yon unheeding throng? They cannot feel my spirit's spell, since life is sweet and life is long. I sing my song, and all is well. My days are never days of ease. I till my ground and prune my trees. When ripened gold is all the plain, I put my sickle to the grain. I labor hard and toil and sweat, while others dream within the dell. But even while my brow is wet, I sing my song, and all is well. Sometimes the sun, unkindly hot, My garden makes a desert spot. Sometimes a blight upon the tree takes all my fruit away from me. And then with throes of bitter pain, rebellious passions rise and swell. But life is more than fruit or grain. And so I sing, and all is well.
Spring song. A bluebell springs upon the ledge. A lark sits singing in the hedge. Sweet perfumes scent the balmy air, and life is brimming everywhere. What lark and breeze and bluebird sing is spring, spring, spring. No more the air is sharp and cold. The planter wends across the wold, and glad beneath the shining sky we wander forth, my love and I, and ever in our hearts doth ring the song of spring, spring. For life is light and love is love, twixt maid and man or dove and dove. Life may be short, life may be long, but love will come, and to its song shall this refrain forever cling of spring, spring, spring.
Oh, springtime, and love is in the air. We're going to leave the city, folks, and go back to the country. Oh, we'll travel across the pond to the countryside in Ireland to hear Pater Murphy tell Dunbar's poetic story of what happened at the spelling bee. Listen closely. Then we'll travel back to the American South to hear Ashabi's rich rendition of Angelina, that flirty dancer. And then we're going to listen to Wanda tell us about her sort of man that Dunbar wrote about years ago called My Sort of Man. Yeah. And then from Wanda Owens, Wanda Owens is going to do My Sort of Man. So better, we can't wait to hear about what happened at the spelling bee.
I never shall forget that night when Father hitched up Dublin and all us youngsters clambered on and down the road went bobbing to school, where we was kept at work in every kind of weather, but where that night a spelling bee was calling us together. 'Twas one of heaven's balmer nights. The stars were all glitter. The moon was shining like the hand of God had just then lit her. The ground was white with spotless snow. The blast was sort of stinging, but underneath our roundabouts, you bet our hearts was singing. The spelling bee had been the talk of many a precious moment. The youngsters all were wild to see just what the precious show meant. And we, whose ears were in their teens, was little less desirous of getting to the meeting, as so as our sweethearts could admire us. So on we went, so anxious for to satisfy our mission, that Father had to box our ears to smother our ambition. But boxing ears was too short work to hinder our raving. He just turned round and smacked us all and kept right on a driving. With school the schoolhouse hove in sight, the windlass beaming brightly, the sound of talking reached our eyes, ears, and voices laughing lightly. It puffed us up so full and big, and I'd just bet $1. There weren't a fella there but felt the strain upon his collar. So down we jumped and in we went, as sprightly as you make 'em. But something grabbed us by the knees and straight began to shake 'em. For once within that lighted room, our feelings took a chanter and scurried to the 0 mark as quick as Tam O'Shanter. 'Cause there was crowds of people there, both sexes and all stations. It looked like all the town had come and brought all their relations. The first I saw was Nettie Gray. I thought that girl was dear and gold, and when I got a chance, you bet I edged up near her. And Farmer Dobbs' girl was there, the one that Jim was sweet on, and Cyrus Jones and Mandy Smith, and Faith and Patience Dayton. Then Parson Brown and Lawyer Jones were present, all attention, and piles of other folks too numerous to mention. The master rose and briefly said, "Good friends, dear brother Crawford, to spur the minds along, a little price is offered to him who spells the best tonight, or maybe her, no telling. He offers as a just reward this precious book of spelling, a little blue-black spelling book with fancy scarlet trimming. We boys devoured it with our eyes, so did the girls and women." He held it up for all to see, then on the table set it, and every speller in the house felt mortal bound to get it. At his command we fell in line, prepared to do our duty. I'd spell the rest and set him down and carry home the booty. 'Twas then the merry times began, the blunders and the laughing, the nudges and the nods and winks, and still good-natured chaffing. Old Uncle Hiram Dane was there, the closest man a-living, whose only bugbear seemed to be the dreadful fear of giving. His beard was long, his hair uncut, his clothes all bare and dingy. It wasn't 'cause the man was poor, but just so mortal stingy. And there he sat by Sally Riggs, a-smiling and a-smirking, and all his children left at home, a-digging and a-working. A widower he was, and Sal was thinking that should win him. I reckon he was wondering what them rings of hers would bring him. And when the spelling test commenced, he up and took a station, a spelling with the best of them, to beat the very nation. And when he'd spell some youngster down, he'd turn and look at Sally and say, "The teaching nowadays can't be on no great valley." But true enough, the adage says, pride walks in slippery places. For soon a thing occurred that put a smile on all our faces. That laughter just kept rippling round, and teacher couldn't quell it. For when he gave out charity, old Hiram couldn't spell it. But laughing's catching, and it throwed some others off their bases, and folks that missed the very word that seemed to fit their cases. Why, fickle little Jessie Lee came near the house upsetting by putting in a double K to spell the word coquetting. And when it came to Cyrus Jones, it tickled me all over, him setting up the Mandy Smith and got shot down on Lover. But Lawyer Jones, of all gun men that surely looked at honest, when he found out that he'd forgot to put the H in honest. And Parson Brown, whose sermons were too long for toleration, caused lots of smiles by missing when they give out condensation. So one by one they give it up. Big words kept the London, till me and Nettie Gray was left, the only ones a-standing. And then my inward strife began. I guess my mind was petty. I did so want that spelling book. But then to spell down Nettie just sort of went against the grain. I somehow couldn't do it. So when I got the notion fixed, I'm great at sticking to it. So when they give the next word out, I hadn't thought to tell it. But then 'twas all for Nettie's sake. I missed so she could spell it. She spelt the word, then looked at me so loving and so mellow. I tell you, I sent 100 pins a shooting through a fella. Of course, I had to stand the jokes and chaffing on the fellas. But when they handed her the book, I vow I wasn't jealous. We sung a hymn and Parson Brown dismissed us like he oughta. He had learned a thing or two and made his blessing shorter. 'Twas late and cold when we got out, but Natty liked cold weather, and so did I. So we agreed we'd just walk home together. We both was silent, for aboards we neither had a surplus, till she spoke out quite sudden like, "You missed that word on purpose." Well, I declare it frightened me. At first I tried denying, but Natty, she just smiled and smiled. She knowed that I was lying. Says she, "That book is yourn by right." Says I, "It never could be." And there I stuck. And well, she understood me. So we agreed that later on, when age had give us together, we'd line our lots and settle down to own that book together.
Well, let's relax from that intriguing suspense of the spelling bee by imagining some lively music and dance lit with youthful energy. Gracefully skilled and joyous and raised with great decorum and grace, Miss Angelina Johnson soars above her circumstances. Angelina, when the fiddle gets to singing out of old Virginia reel, and you meant to feel a tickling in your toe and in your heel, if you think you got religion and you wants to keep it too, just better take a hint and get yourself clean out of view. 'Cause the time is mighty tempting when the tune is in the swing for a brother, saint or sinner man, to cut the pigeon wing. And you couldn't help from dancing if your feet was bound with twine when Angelina Johnson comes a swinging down the line. Don't you know Miss Angelina? She's the darling of the place. Why, there ain't no high-toned lady with such manners and such grace. She can move across the cabin with its planks all rough and woe, just the same she was dancing on old Mister's ballroom floor. Fact is, you don't see no cabin. Everything you see look grand. And that one old school fiddle sound to you just like a band. Cotton breeches look like broadcloth and a linsey dress look fine when Angelina Johnson comes a swinging down the line. Some folks say that dancing's sinful, and the blessed Lord, they say, gonna punish us for stepping when we hear the music play. But I tell you, I don't believe it, for the Lord is wise and good, and he made the banjos metal, and he made the fiddles wood, and he made the music in them, so I don't quite think he'll care if our feet keeps time a little to the melodies we hear. Why, there's something downright holy in the way our faces shine when Angelina Johnson comes a swinging down the line. Angelina steps so gentle. Angelina bows so low. And she lifts her skirt so dainty that her shoe tops scarcely show. And them teeth of her are shining as she take you by the hand. Go away, people. There ain't another such a lady in the land. When she's moving through the figures or dancing by herself, folks just saying, stand stock still or staying, and they most nigh holds their breath. And the young men's, they's a saying, I's gonna make that damsel mine when Angelina Johnson comes a swinging down the line.
My sort of man. I don't believe in aristocrats and never did, you see. That plain old home life sort of folks is good enough for me. Of course, I don't desire a man to be too tarnal rough, but then I think all folks should know when they are good enough. Now, there's folks in this here world, from peasant up to king, who want to be so awful nice, they overdo the thing. That's just the thing that makes me sick. And quicker in a wink, I set it down that them same folks ain't half so good you think. I like to see a man dressed nice, in clothes becoming too. I like to see a woman fix as women ought to do. And boys and gals, I like to see look fresh and young and spry. We all must have our vanity and pride before we die. But I judge no man by his clothes, nor gentleman nor tramp. The man that wears the finest suit may be the biggest scamp. And he whose limbs are clad in rags that makes a mournful sight, in life's great battle may have proved a hero in the fight. I don't believe in aristocrats. I like the honest tan that lies upon the healthful cheek and speaks the honest man. I like to grasp the brawny hand that labor's lips have kissed. For he who has not labored here, life's greatest pride has kissed. The pride to feel that your own strength has cleaved for you the way to heights to which you were not born, but struggled day by day. What though the thousands sneer and scoff and scorn your humble birth? Kings are but puppets. You are king by right of royal worth. The man who simply sits and waits for good to come along ain't worth the breath that one would take to tell him he is wrong. For good ain't flowing round this world for every fool to sup. You've got to put your seers on and go and hunt it up. Good goes with honesty, I say, to honor and to bless. To rich and poor alike it brings a wealth of happiness. The aristocrats ain't got it all, for much to their surprise. That's one of earth's most blessed things they can't monopolize.
Move north to the city of Dayton, where Dunbar was born. Donna Marie will speak on Dunbar's appreciation of common things. Jody will present Dunbar's poem to himself, He Had His Dream. While Oni Lasana will take us into Dunbar's dual creative musings by way of The Paradox. We will close our program with Bettye Haskins sharing The Place Where the Rainbow Ends.
I like to hear of wealth and gold and Eldorados in their glory. I like her silks and satins bold to sweep through and rustle through the story. The nightingale is sweet to sing. The rare exotic smells divinely. And knightly men who stride along the role heroic carry finely. But then, upon the other hand, our minds have got a way of running to things that aren't quite so grand, which maybe we were best in shunning. For some of us still like to see the poor man in his dwelling narrow, the hollyhock, the bumblebee, the meadowlark, and chirping sparrow. We like the man who soars and sings with high and lofty aspiration, but he who sings of common things shall always share our admiration.
He had his dreams. He had his dream, and all through life worked up to it through toil and strife. Afloat for air before his eyes, it colored for him all his skies. The storm cloud dark above his bark, the calm and listless vault of blue took on its hopeful hue. It tinctured every passing beam. He had his dream. He labored hard, and failed at last, his sails too weak to bear the blast. The raging tempest tore away and sent his beating bark astray. But what cared he for wind or sea? He said, "The tempest will be short. My bark will come to port." He saw through every cloud a gleam. He had his dream.
Yes, he had his dreams. And Dunbar's dreams were filled with ups and downs. And he wrote about his dreams in the paradox. I am the mother of sorrow. I am the ender of grief. I am the bud and the blossom. I am the late falling leaf. I am thy priest and thy poet. I am thy serf and thy king. I cure the tears of the heart sick. When I come near, they shall sing. White are my hands as the snowdrop. Swarth are my fingers as clay. Dark is my frown as the midnight. Fair is my brow as the day. Battle and wars are my minion. Oh, doing my will as divine. I am the calmer of passions. Peace is a nursling of mine. Speak to me gently or curse me. Seek me or fly from my sight. I am thy fool in the morning, and thou art my slave in the night. Down to the grave will I take thee, out from the noise of the strife. Then shalt thou see me and know me. Death, then, no longer, but life. Then shalt thou sing at my coming, kiss me with passionate breath, clasp me and smile to have thought me, ah, save the foeman of death. Come to me, brother, when weary. Come when my lonely heart swells. I'll guide thy footsteps and lead thee down where the dream woman dwells.
Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds sing, or is there a pot of gold? Here's what Dunbar says about the place where the rainbow ends. There's a fabulous story, full of splendor and glory that Arabian legends transcends, of the wealth without measure, the coffers of treasure at the place where the rainbow ends. Oh, many have sought it, and all would have bought it with the blood we so recklessly spend. But none has uncovered the gold, nor discovered the spot at the rainbow's end. They have sought it in battle, and even where the rattle of dice with man's blasphemy blends. But however persuasive, it still proves evasive, this place where the rainbow ends. I own for my pleasure, I yearn not for treasure, though gold has a power it lends. And I have a notion to find without motion the place where the rainbow ends. The pot may hold pottage, the place be a cottage that a humble contentment defends. Only joy fills its coffer, but spite of the scoffer, there's the place where the rainbow ends, where care shall be quiet, and love shall run riot, and I shall find wealth in my friends. Then truce to the story of riches and glory. There's the place where the rainbow ends.
Thank you, Betty Haskins. And We want to thank all of you for staying with us. And we hope you enjoyed Dunbar from city to country. Our lineup and artist information and how you can support us is in the chat. Okay? Now, if you feel inspired to join our group, please reach out at our website, loveofdunbar.com, or you can write us at our email, loveofdunbar@gmail.com. You can also subscribe to our Love of Dunbar YouTube channel. This channel is an educational channel. We want to expand Dunbar's works around the world. And also the video of this program will be posted there in a few weeks. We'd like to thank Peadar Murphy, way over there in Ireland, for staying up late with us. Oh, it's about 1 or 2 o'clock in Ireland right now. And for also helping us as a tech host. Also, I can't thank all the wonderful artists who share their love of Dunbar with you tonight. You heard from Ashabi Rich, WANDA Owens, Donna Marie, Jody, Bettye, and Ashabi. Did I say Ashabi already? Well, anyway, this time we ask for you to raise your virtual hand. We're going to open the house. You can speak to us, tell us your comments, questions, or feedback. And that way Murphy can see and he can unmute you. And also, if you'd like to share a Dunbar poem with us. We're so glad you are here with us at the place where the rainbow ends. Okay, thanks, Birdie.
Next time
Thank you, Birdie.
next time I'll note, I'll write down something that, but I thought it was the whole program was wonderful.
Thank you.
Hi, Martha.
Hello. I enjoyed the program. I'm sure you all agreed it's very difficult to choose a Dunbar poem. I was waiting to hear something about Matilda. I think that is, as any mother would feel special that her child would write something and include them in it. And so one of his poems, at least one of them, has the character of Matilda. But I was going to share the turning of the babies in the bed.
All right now.
And this is one husband making observation about his wife's child caring. Woman sure a curious critter, and there ain't no doubting that. She's a mess of funny capers from her slippers to her hat. If you tries to understand her, there and you fails, just up and say, there ain't a bit of use to try to understand a woman's way. I don't mean to be complaining, but I's just a setting down some of my own observations when I cast my eye around. If you ask me for to prove it, I can do it mighty fine. For there ain't no better example than this very wife of mine. In the very heat of midnight, when I sleeping good and sound, I can hear a sort of rustling and somebody moving round. And I say, Lassie, what you doing? But she frown and shake her head. Hush your mouth. I's only turning of the children in the bed. Don't you know a child gets restless laying all the night one way? And you got to kinda range 'em several times before the day. So they little necks won't worry and they little backs won't break. Don't you think 'cause children's, they ain't got no pain and ache. So she shakes 'em and she twists 'em and she turns 'em round about. Well, I don't see how the children ever gets from hollering out. Then she lifts 'em up, head downwards, so's they won't get liver grown.
but they snoozes just as peaceful as a lizard on a stone. When it's most nigh time for waking on the dawn of Judgment Day, seems like I can hear Gabriel lay his trumpet down and say, "Who that walking round so easy down on earth among the dead? 'Twill be Lizzie, up and a turning of the children in the bed." And that's the turning of the babies in the bed.
Nice.
I love it.
Lovely.
I love it.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes.